I created this tutorial for my students in order to help them understand how a dichotomous key works. A dichotomous key is a key that helps you identify items that are unknowns. In order to explain to you how the key works, I will start with something that you're very familiar with, though. I will start with the numbers 1 through 10. So picture the numbers 1 through 10 in your head. For ease of demonstration, I put a row of numbers on the right hand side. And let's see how we can try to figure out which number somebody is thinking of by essentially playing a game of 20 questions. The dichotomous key presents a user with a selection of questions. Each question usually has two options, and you choose one or the other, and then it will take you to the next question based on the answer you chose. Obviously, there are lots of different ways to distinguish the numbers 1 through 10. But the way I chose to distinguish them on the first question is to just simply say, how many digits does the number have? Because by separating the digits, I immediately pull out the 10 from all the other ones. When setting up a dichotomous key, most people find it easier to use a flowchart or a decision tree. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use a flowchart to try to work this out. At this point, we have separated out the number 10 out of the rest of them by separating out the single digits from the double digits. How are you going to distinguish now the numbers 1 through 9? Again, there are lots of options how to distinguish the numbers 1 through 9, but one option is to distinguish odd and even numbers. Since you can't necessarily grab your numbers off one by one, I sorted them out on the slide into the odd and the even numbers so that I know what I'm working with for each path. So what would be a next possible step to distinguish these numbers? I chose to go with the question, are they divisible by 3? The numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8, only one of the numbers is divisible by 3, the other 3 are not. Again, there are lots of ways how you could distinguish the rest of the numbers on of the even numbers. I chose to go with shape this time. So what is the shape of the number? Does it have an angular shape or does it have rounded parts? And that selects out the 4. To separate the last two out from one another, I separated them out into containing full circles or not containing full circles. And by doing so, I have now separated out all the even numbers from each other. Now it comes time to do the odd numbers. If you wanted to, you could now pause this presentation and see about taking the odd numbers and separating them out similarly to the way I've done with the even numbers. Time's up. We're going to go ahead and separate out the odd numbers now. Again, there are lots of ways to do this. I chose to again go with the divisible by 3 versus not divisible by 3. And I sorted the numbers on the bottom to again see what I was working with and give us a little bit of a visual here. This next step allows me to separate the 3 and the 9 out by looking at whether one of them contains a circle and the other one does not. separating out the shapes, the angular shape versus the number containing a rounded part, separates out the 5, and that leaves me with just needing to find a way to distinguish the 1 from the 7. That's a little bit problematic because they're both angular. They're both prime numbers, but there's got to be a way to distinguish those two, right? I chose to use the little peculiarity of the prime number 1 by taking advantage of the fact that 1 is only divisible by 1, while every other prime number is divisible by 1 and by itself. So that is how I distinguish the last two. Most tutorials asking you to create a dichotomous key only go to about here, and they don't actually show you how to then get to the questions. But that's another step, and that's actually an important step in order to be able to make this key happen. So the way you get from this flowchart to an actual list of questions is by turning every separation, so every branch point into a question. So the first thing I did is I labeled the questions as so every branch point, so I would keep track of what my questions were going to be. After all the branch points are labeled, and I chose to label them in layers rather than going down one branch before the other, but either one would be possible, so it doesn't matter in which order you would label these questions. Now it's time to actually write out the questions. So for question 1, to actually put it in question form, how many bit digits does the number have? For question 2, it could be, is the number odd or even? And again, these questions can take lots of different shapes, and the answers just have to be appropriate so that they work. After all the questions are listed, then it's possible to just simply put them into a chart. And this is the final key to distinguish the numbers 1 through 10. It starts with saying how many digits does the number have? Is the number odd or even? So if it has a single digits, you go to question number 2. If it's got double digits, you already know the number is 10. The next question is the number odd or even? If it's odd, you go to 4. If it's even, you go to 3. Now note that question 3 and question 4 are the same question, but they take you to a different place. And that's one of the things to keep in mind when you're trying to go through a dichotomous key. You can't just start in the middle to try to find your answer. You actually have to go all the way from the beginning, because if you're looking at a number that is odd and it's divisible by 3 versus a number that's even and it's divisible by 3, you're going to get different answers. I hope this helps you understand how a dichotomous key is created and how a dichotomous key works.